Cool. I'm extremely excited to share my learnings on design system with you guys, right? Disclaimer, of course, is that all of these learnings that you're going to see here is retrospective. So, of course, when we started, we did not know all of this. Only when we worked after 1.5 years of effort, when we look back, is what we realized, and these learnings came to sight, right? All right, let me just move further, right? Are anyone here who use cult.fit app or have any experience using that app, right? So, okay, there are a few. So long back, I think somewhere around 1.5 years back, right? Our visual language was very different, and it was essentially a white theme. We, of course, see it as more than just white or black theme, but let's simplify here that piece. And we we wanted to take it to another level, and we worked on a different language together. And the resultant language, of course, there's more complexity there, but let's keep it simple. It was black theme, right? The new theme was black, and we were all very excited, and we called it Aurora, right? This is essentially the visual language that we all worked up towards. Now, the challenge is how will you scale this new language, Aurora, to all the different screens, right? At that point of time, we had 4+ unique intent products. So, of course, one is around cult.fit is known for fitness, but then we had mental health product. We also had e-commerce product, right? Of course, now sitting with developers and getting every single screen changed one by one is a painstakingly difficult and not a very efficient way to get things done. That's exactly where design system came out to us as a very organic solution, right? So subatoms, or how Brad Frost puts design tokens in a way of subatoms, which is essentially style guide elements, right? Different colors, what kind of spacings, all of those different elements. That is our language. And from there, we took it to 500+ components and more, of course. Right. So Brad Frost was a pioneer in atomic design methodology, right? So that was our core crux of where we started. He feels, or he says, design system is an official story of how your organization designs and builds digital products, right? And I very much, of course, align with this statement. Looking back is how I would define design system to be. Well, this has already been covered very well by previous speakers. So I won't spend a lot of time. Let's just go fast over this piece. Design system is a meaningful bundle of well-documented pattern libraries where an ecosystem of interconnected patterns and shared practices live, right? Now, thanks to Devesh, my work on pattern is now very easy. I don't have to explain that. It's reusable, repeating components or practices. Interconnected the point of interconnection or interdependency of different patterns is something that I would like to little bit put light on. So pattern libraries means collection of patterns, and these patterns can be color system, type scale, spacing scale, right? All of those collection I am terming as pattern libraries. Even the component libraries is part of this entire piece. Now the thing is, these pattern libraries are dependent on each other, right? So you change color here, even the component changes there, depending on if that component uses that color or not. This is just an example, but that entire thing snowballs very fast. Shared practices, again, something which Devesh already covered, is around design principles, is something that we strongly have today. And guidelines, what are the do's and don'ts, which is essentially useful for new joinees, as also mentioned by previous speaker. I'll go through it because you don't need it now. Previous speaker has covered it. Okay, so just a very quick disclaimer. What I mean when I say design system, it's not just a very fancy file living on the design software of your choice, right? It is also the code. So there's a development effort that has gone, and design plus code together is the entire package that we call as design system, right? All right, when we think about design system, the first word that comes to our mind, why design system? Consistency, right? And Chaitanya has also talked very, very deeply on consistency. And it absolutely is the right way forward, but consistency creates familiarity and brand recall, right? From the user side, from a user's perspective, clearly that's a very huge value add. So somewhere around 1.5 years back, this is exactly how our effort began. standardization is the word we used to give to that effort at that time. And so let's say we pick up the confirmation experiences, we pick up the feedback experiences, right? And we have this already mentioned different unique intent products. We see how the confirmation screens are. We create a common pattern, very much in the way mentioned by Devesh before as well. And then we have a certain common blueprint, and we apply that blueprint everywhere, and cool, then developers are in action and it is live. And then we come back, what's the ROI? We have nothing to show for the return. It's just the experience is more consistent. It's good for users, but it's meh. It's right. Essentially, you don't have strong way to defend or even measure whether it has impact. Hence, coming to the second piece, consistency creates efficiency, right? Now, this is essentially where the magic started to happen. And I would say this is essentially the point where we actually entered the arena of design system, from the style guide or even a UI kit to a real proper design system that can live up to its name, the essence of what design system really means. So consistency creates efficiency, but consistency is hard. We all know that, right? Consistency is hard, especially at scale. And scale is a very important keyword to keep in mind as we move forward, right? So product life cycle, Devesh also mentioned this before about who does not need a design system and where design system is essential. So again, very quickly going through this. So there are 4 stages in a given product usually. You have an introduction phase, growth, maturity, and then the product declines and you sunset the product, right? In introduction, the entire team is trying to develop conviction whether the idea works, whether users value it. You are trying to get product market fit, right? You want first 1,000 fans. Once you have that, once the team has conviction that, okay, this product works, there are enough people to vote with their wallets, so to speak, right? Then you get into the growth stage, and then you hit saturation, and then you fall down. And clearly in all of these, only the middle 2 stages, right? The growth and maturity are the stages where you have scale. In growth, the scaling begins, and then in maturity, you have scale. And this is essentially are the 2 phases where design system has its most impact. That is what I have learned when I look back. So efficiency increasingly matters when scaling begins. If you don't have scale, then it's very hard to sell the proposition of design system to your higher ups, essentially at your common place. That's why some products will say design system did not add a lot of value, and they will be right because maybe they were in the initial or ending phases. And other products will say design system definitely helped, depending on what phase they are in. Okay, so again, design system is all about making consistency convenient. This was a very interesting learning for me. Consistency is hard, as we just saw. And this is exactly where design system came for us, that scaling that language across all the different products and screens that we had, right? So that making that consistency convenient was a very key value add that we felt looking back for design system. One very important thumb rule to keep in mind, at least I keep in mind that personally, bigger the heartache of scale, bigger and more varied are the benefits of having a design system. So the perceived benefit of design system is also different depending on who you are. Everyone is not gonna see the same benefit in design system, and they should not, which does make sense. So now let's dive further into a very interesting link between design system and efficiency, because that is the piece which is most sellable and which also makes more sense, right? Now, if you are working on a classic product, a digital product, you will have 3 functions, right? The EPD trio, that is. So you have engineering, product, and design. Of course, there will be other domain experts depending on what product you work on, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just focus on these 3. So you have product managers, you have designers, you have developers. So the amount of time it takes for you to conceive the product, right? Where the product managers comes with ideas, brainstorming, all of that. The time to conception, the amount of time it takes to design that product, and the amount of time the developers take to develop that. So let's call it design velocity and development velocity. I'm not putting MENT because it doesn't look good. Form over function. Okay, so then it goes to true. So the final result of that is the amount of time you take to ship to the market. So time to market. is, let's call it as shipping velocity. And now let's see how design system adds value on these stages, right? Okay, of course, one of the important things is we already have component libraries in place. So you can reuse component libraries, and then it gives you a workflow boost. But not only to designers, it also gives boost to developers, right? Because you just have to pick up and assemble components and boom, you have something ready. One anecdote I can share there is once we actually started this. Adoption of design system is super hard, especially when you're making something new. So at that time, I can recall we were working on a mental health product and it was gonna go live. And we had one component, that was, I think, the first few components that were made live. So we simply just put together a product in 1 week, which was unprecedented in essentially the place I work at, right? In one week, so the product conception stage was already over, but in 1 week, we were able to put together an entire product and make it live, which essentially is just this workflow on steroids point very strong. So let's add this further, right? So workflow boost. So this boosts your design velocity and development velocity. That directly goes to the overall time to market is reduced, time saving, right? Now, if you are a designer, you can relate, I'm pretty sure. What you design on the top, let's say, there's a pattern and what gets developed, right? Let's call it the first draft of code. This is like one of the most big pain points that I have found when I was new as a designer. Now, because you already have a component library and you have a design system team which is working on that, they design review for visual accuracy with the coders already, right? So you already have high precision implementation in place. That reduces a lot of pain of reviewing the code for accuracy for design owners who are working on projects, not design system, but the design owners who are working on their own respective projects. It reduces time, it gives them more time to focus on something that I'm coming to next. So precision implementation, that again reduces development velocity, right? This again further improves shipping velocity. Now, because we already figured out, designers now have more time, right? So where will they invest this extra time? Because now they don't have to do eye candy pixel pushing, right? They don't have to make something look pretty for presentation, not for handoff, right? So this leads to this, more of that time can go into innovation, right? They can now focus more of their time with the PMs, working on the product, working on the UX, right? Actually testing out those designs rather than actually making it look good. And this is exactly what we also saw at our place. Overall amount of time that the design owners spend with their PMs, right? That literally increased. And more of input was free and available to be given on product conception stage by the designer. So essentially imagine like the amount of brain power you have on the conception stage increases. I won't call it double, but it increases definitely. And even the product thinking. So overall, this entire EPD trio, right? Suddenly now it is able to give more product focus than it was before, just with the same number of people and same talent. Now with Figma, we already know that we can make interactive prototypes, right? So we definitely did not shy away from that. So you can now create fast interactive prototypes. So the moment the screen is put together, the designer can just hit the play button and show it and test it out with their users right away. So you can interactive prototype fast, and you can also user test even faster. Now, because we already saw that the shipping velocity is reduced, right? Time to market is fast. You can roll out just 10% of the new experience to the actual user base and run A/B experiments, and you can learn faster. So overall, your ability to learn fast also increases. This is a very less talked about benefit of design system that I have usually seen. So let's add this into the picture as well. So now you are able to create better quality, well-tested products faster, right? Which is essentially a huge efficiency boost, but we'll go further. So let's zoom out and let's talk about something that Devesh already mentioned. Creating collective clarity with single source of truth, which is shared language, right? So let's zoom out further. right? So if we zoom out, you can see quality and speed is taken care of. But is there anything more we get out of design system? Shared language is essentially more about improving knowledge sharing, right? Now, a lot of these points, I think two of these points were already covered by Devesh, but I would like to focus on the first one. Has this happened with you that you get if you use Slack, you get a message, can you share this file with me, right? Can you point me to this component, right? And you will do that because of course, otherwise you are a blocker to that person. So I term these kind of, whether this happened with chat or sometimes video calls or whatever, I call it as resource finding meetings or conversations, right? Which are essentially, what do you say, avoidable meetings if there was a common source of truth. This is a very strong benefit that I have found of design system. These kind of meetings have reduced drastically, I would say somewhere by 80%. Right, so you don't have you have very less instances where people or your team members are reaching out to you. Also for developers, of course, reaching out to you and saying, can you point me to this file, to this component, to this code? All of that has reduced a lot. I won't go into the other two because already Devesh has covered. New joinee can also onboard very easily. You just shared the entire. In our case, it is Figma link for design joinees. For developers, it's a different UI kit. And it also minimizes siloed knowledge clearly. So you simply are able to know more and there is less concentrated knowledge. The interesting thing about new joinees is that they want to know this. They want to understand how do you design, what does your buttons look like. So we don't have to like pester them that, hey, please go through this, right? They will come and ask you that, can you tell us how do you do bottom navigations, for example? How do you do on your product, right? What is the way in which you design? Just as we saw in the earlier slides, Brad Frost said, official story of how you design, right? They want to know this because this context is essential for, at least in the first 1 or 2 weeks, for new joinees to even get into action. Irrespective of how talented they are, they want to know because they have to understand how you work to join with you, right? So anyway, a good conclusion of this point is meetings. Meetings, we spend a lot of time meetings, right? No matter if you are an individual contributor, you have to accept that we spend a lot of time in just meetings, sitting around discussing. This is a huge value add that I think I have not heard a lot of people talk about is, let's say if a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings, then a design system is worth 100,000 ones. It saves a lot of avoidable meetings. And this is on top of the quality and speed boost that you already get, right? Let's talk about one last point, but a very important one. Design and tech scalability, right? So we already talked about the shared knowledge bit. So let's add scalable system in the mix. So from my perspective, I feel scalable system has 3 components. Pattern management, it is not dependent on tech anymore and brand anymore, right? So it is agnostic of both of those elements. Let's go with brand agnostic first. So every 5 to 7 years, usually, roughly, brands either rebrand or completely change their entire brand language. This is not a very dependable information, but a good thumb rule to have, right? This is exactly something that I think was already mentioned by previous speakers. Design system helps you do that super easily. It's just changing. On the code side, it is a class, so changing the value and it just changes everywhere, right? And multi-brand also is a very interesting thing that I'm now connecting after hearing to Devesh's talk. Tech agnostic. So this exactly something that we actually did. We were a React platform before. We used to use React technology for Cult app before Aurora. And during this time, we decided that we want to move to Flutter because I think developers found that designers are too fussy and they wanted this fancy animations and whatnot. So anyway, they had to move to Flutter. So design system absolutely helped, especially the component library part of design system, helped them in moving from React to Flutter. And now we are in Flutter. We are still in the transition, but for a huge chunk of the app, it is already in Flutter. Now, the big part here is pattern management. So patterns, I think we've already talked about. Pattern management, this is where a lot of effort from the company, this is essentially where the design system team lives, right? Adding new components, creating new components, editing existing components. On top of that, a design ops function of having processes in place so that all new experiences that are created, that are reviewed and aligned to the existing design system, right? This is essentially the place where the entire design system bandwidth goes, right? Design system teams bandwidth goes. So pattern management is very essential to keep this entire design system going and living. It should be changing with time, and it cannot just become something etched in stone, right? So let's go to quick recap. Scalable system and shared language. So scalable system is something that now you have future proof because it is constantly evolving. It can handle any change in tech that your product will ever come across in future, hopefully. And also at the same time, it can pivot to different brand languages if you so need, right? So that's the power of the scalable system piece. Shared language, so there's better communication between your teams, the entire EPD trio, and if you extend that system to even brand teams and creative teams, even that can be further supported with that. And now you are able to improve your focus, your product teams, your pod teams rather, I would say, for specific feature teams, more on the product, and they can leave the worry of how the UI will actually look, the minor spacing things, to the design system team, right? So there's a better distribution of skill, and you can focus more on shipping velocity. So you have faster products at higher quality, and that's how the entire thing translates to efficiency, right? So efficiency is essentially about making consistent, well-tested, high-quality, future-proof products faster. That is how I see the overall benefit of a design system is essentially all of these 5 things. Well-tested and high quality on top of the future-proof. Consistent though, I'm sure pretty much everyone knows about. This, I think, is the most important slide in my perspective, and I was very blown away when I realized this. So in an group, they have this UX maturity model. This is the last slide, so don't worry, we are at the end. Okay. So in an group, they have this UX maturity model where these 6 stages are already put in place by the NN group. And over time, design system, I have seen design system, the kind of conversations we have at our place now, they are so much more product and UX focused compared to before we had the design system at place. Right, so you literally can contribute to elevating maturity of UX or overall design at your own place just by having this, having part to play in design system, which I think is the biggest benefit that you can accumulate over time. Yeah, that's it.